Hello, welcome to STH English. So, finally, round two of Iran US talks is happening in Islamabad. There has been a lot of to and fro on this, a lot of uncertainty surrounded this. Till midnight last night, Pakistan Standard Time, we were not sure whether anyone is arriving in Islamabad or not for these talks. To the extent that the administration of the Twin Cities joined at the critical point of Faizabad. The deputy commissioners of both the cities issued denials that there is some sort of a special arrangement. Then, within the next 8 hours, both the deputy commissioners, the administrators, had to issue from the same X handle another statement saying that yes, the traffic is shut down in Islamabad. But Islamabad is not the only city which has had to witness this kind of a back and forth. Even Washington has been cagey about who's coming and who's not coming. Initially, we heard Donald Trump, who broke the news that his team will be arriving in Pakistan for talks tomorrow, suggesting that the vice president will not be there. J.D. Vance, instead of him, and the other two members will be filling in the gaps for him, Witkoff and Kushner, who were also part of the previous delegation. But then another correspondent spoke to the White House, and the White House said that J.D. Vance is traveling to Pakistan. So we do not know till the birds have landed in Islamabad who will be part of the American delegation finally, but it looks that it's going to be the same delegation that arrived here the last time round. Iranian's team is also not really transparent as far as details are concerned, but we expect similar delegations to arrive as they did previously. What time the talks start is something of a mystery. So a lot of expectations at a time of ambiguity. How do you interpret this kind of a back and forth? Donald Trump, in the last 1 hour or so, has shot out something like 3 dozen tweets, 10 in self-praise, nearly 16 against Democrats and Joe Biden, his favorite punching bag, 3 criticizing Iran, and a couple of others. So there's a lot of shooting of the social media messaging that is going on. So in the middle of all of this, we need to have some clarity as to what does this round actually mean. Is it going to lead to a breakthrough? My sources in Islamabad tell me that we started from zero preparation to preparation for all the possibilities. When I asked what are those possibilities, they said second round taking place inconclusive, third round taking place almost after 2 days, second round being successful, leading to some sort of an agreement, third round taking place after a little while, second round being very successful, closure taking place, and then possibly Donald Trump landing here. So all the possibilities are there on the table. And we also have somebody who can throw incredible insights and light onto this ambiguity, excitement, expectations, and the to and fro. Munir Akram Saab, who is our decorated diplomat, and I was counting the number of stations he has served on. These are more than 16 plus. He has served in all the senior positions. He has been Pakistan's permanent rep at the UN and has been an incredible policy shaper when he was posted here in the Foreign Office. Munir Akram Saab, thank you very much for joining us and taking out the time. First, tell me your take on the second round, because as journalists start to pour in, Islamabad is going to be choking with expectations. What to expect and what not to expect?
Well, I think the good news is that it is evident that both sides want to find an agreement. The bad news is that the positions are very different on a number of issues, and that the issues have themselves proliferated as a result of this conflict. Previously, we were talking mainly about the nuclear issue and the sanctions issues, which were the crux of the negotiations. Now we have the Strait of Hormuz has emerged as a major issue and something that needs to be resolved as early as possible. And then there are other issues of long-term security in the region, the issue of proxies, the issue of American bases. All of these issues will have to be addressed at some point or the other. But I suspect that the best approach would be to go step by step, to see how, first of all, to consolidate the ceasefire which was announced and which included the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think, therefore, if the focus would be on the Strait of Hormuz and on reaching at least a framework for a solution of the nuclear issue, I think those two would be major achievements and could lay the ground for a broader dialogue on peace and security in the region, but that probably will have to happen at a later stage.
That's very sobering what you say. You're well informed and you obviously know the process better than anybody else. You have been part and parcel of such processes in the past as well. But let's look at the level of expectations, how these expectations were ballooned by the actors who are negotiating, primarily Donald Trump, who started off even in the first round suggesting that the deal was round the bend. And when J.D. Vance, rather crestfallen, announced that there was no deal and they had made their final offer to the Iranians and then the delegation left, there was a little, murmuring that perhaps that was it. But then again, Chief of Defense Forces went there and Strait of Hormuz opened up and the Iranians said that, it is open for all sort of traffic. And Donald Trump thanked Iran. Now, the same Donald Trump ended up today threatening them that I will blow up the whole country if you do not have the deal. And the Iranians, in the meanwhile, have shut down Strait of Hormuz again. So there are these, expectations that get ballooned up within a cycle of 12 hours and get deflated in the next cycle of 12 hours. How do you read this?
Well, the as I said, I think there are core issues, and then there are new issues that have arisen. So when we announced the ceasefire, the understanding that Pakistan had and Iran also had was that Lebanon would be covered in the ceasefire. And then we found the Israelis attacking Lebanon, and then in response, the Iranians refused to open the Strait of Hormuz, which they had agreed to in the first ceasefire. They had said it is open under coordination with our military authorities, but it was open. So Lebanon became the issue to be addressed, and that was addressed. And Trump then prevailed on Netanyahu to declare a ceasefire. But Netanyahu is continuing to selectively violate that ceasefire. So Lebanon had to be addressed. And then, of course, the Americans then put this counter blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, which, after Iran's foreign minister announced the opening of the strait, Donald Trump said no. Yes, it's open, but our blockade will continue against Iran, and that was obviously not acceptable. So that has to be addressed, and I think it would probably be one of the major issues in the next round, is to address the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz in conditions that would be acceptable to both sides. That's one issue. On the nuclear issue, the major issue that it is a core issue, I think the Iranians and the Americans will probably not agree to other things until there is at least some understanding of what the solution would be on the nuclear issue. I think according to the reports, there was some understanding that in response to a reiteration of Iran's right to enrichment, it would be ready to suspend enrichment in practical terms for a period of time. And there was a difference on what the period of time will be. So perhaps there would be a focus on what would be the period of time where enrichment is suspended. But there are other issues in the nuclear file. The issue of what will happen to the enriched uranium that
Yeah.
is now buried somewhere in
Which
Isfahan
Donald
or
Trump calls nuclear dust, which of course is a misnomer, but we could understand what he's trying to say.
That's right. It's the 60% enriched 400 kilograms of uranium that is there. Uh, Donald Trump, President Trump has said we will take it. Iran has said we will not give it to the US. There will have to be another solution. So we'll have to find another solution. In the past, also, Iran had given up its enriched uranium to Russia. So would that be the solution this time? Would it be a solution for them to blend it down as they have offered, to blend it down from 60% enriched to 3% enriched, or combination of the two solutions? So I think these are some of the immediate issues that will have to be addressed in the second round. But there are other issues that have arisen as a result of the
But if,
conflict.
if I could just interject here, but you have listed the issues, and of course we'll come to the other issues that you've identified. We're going to identify from the looks of it. And I have two questions. One is the sort of front question, and the backup question is a more interesting one. It's almost like firefighting. This is not mediating. It's like issues kind of popping up as if they were kind of unguided missiles, and you have to shoot them down. So, in your diplomatic experience, uh, is this the best way to make progress? Should you not nail down the agenda of the talks and then move layer by layer and say, while these issues may pop up, they are not going to be on the table. Let's first settle these. But from what you have narrated, and that's a very perceptive comment on the way negotiations have unfolded so far, core issues get multiplied and get stumped by and appended by peripheral issues who become in turn the core issues.
Absolutely. No, this is obviously a very difficult negotiation. I think we cannot underestimate the severity of the differences between Iran and the United States and Israel. Um, as you will recall, in the past, the US has said we want to deal with the nuclear issue, with the missile issue, with Iran's proxies, all of those issues, and Iran has refused to talk about the missile issue and the issue of proxies, but they are there. They are in the back of the mind of the parties. Therefore, I think the important thing would be how to keep the negotiations alive and how to reach the end result of a comprehensive peace between the US, Iran, and the other countries of the Gulf, which have also become involved in this conflict because Iran did attack the American bases and some of civilian facilities in the GCC. So they are also involved. Their security is also involved. So the issues have proliferated and will obviously have to be addressed in a comprehensive settlement if one can be achieved. But the immediate issues, I think the core issues, as I said now, are the nuclear file and the issue of the Strait of Hormuz. And
Right?
if these
Yeah.
these issues are solved, then maybe we can move on to other issues that have arisen.
Munir Akram Saab, right now as I speak to you, the real issue seems to be, in terms of the news flow, whether the Iranians will actually come here or not. Now, we were just mentioning whether it is JD Vance who's leading it, or is he coming here or not? He's not going to Pakistan, said Donald Trump. He's going to Pakistan, said the White House. Another one of our reporters who's been reporting fairly accurately said that JD Vance is unlikely to be here because if he's here, then Donald Trump can't come here. American law doesn't permit both the vice president and the president to be in the same country or be out of the country at the same time. Now we're hearing that JD Vance is coming, which means that Trump is not coming. If that wasn't complex enough, I'm just reading the news from Tasneem, the Iranian news reported by Clash Report that Iran won't send negotiators or hold talks with the US as long as Trump's naval blockade remains. So, we don't even know whether the Iranian negotiators are going to land here. We know about the Americans. You know, is this really the way negotiations have unfolded in the past on the table when you are not even sure whether the negotiators are going to turn up or not, or at least one party?
Yes, it's a complex negotiation, but I think what you have recounted also underlines the importance of the mediatory effort which Pakistan has made. And this has been extraordinary because mostly mediators would just be the kind of conduit for messages or providing the venue. But I think in this context, Pakistan and especially Prime Minister and especially the Field Marshal have played a much more active role in trying to reconcile positions. And I think that the Field Marshal's visit to Iran was critical in trying to persuade the two parties that there was still space for an agreement on the critical issues. Now, obviously, if the Iranian delegation comes and J.D. Vance and his team come, this will be an indication that some sort of a backdoor understanding has been reached, which is sufficient to instill confidence on both sides that the major stumbling blocks which have appeared, uh, firstly, the blockade, the American blockade, countering the Iranian blockade, and secondly, on the whole issue of the nuclear enrichment, that some understandings may have been reached on the basis of which both sides feel confident enough to come back for a second round. But I think the backdoor understandings have been promoted by Pakistan and by the Field Marshal in his negotiation. I think that may be the basis on which the two sides will come. If the Iranians don't come, it would imply that that agreement or that understanding has not been reached.
Okay,
But
yeah.
gee,
This is very interesting about the back door, uh, pushing the front door to remain open. But right now, we don't see the back door to have created even enough of momentum, at least from the looks of it. I mean, it may well be happening. It is just that everybody is posturing, so we have to go by whatever is available for the front door to remain open. Let's dissect a bit, if you could, please. Um, the the Donald Trump strategy of negotiations. So he goes with first tweet or social media post saying I'm going to annihilate an entire civilization, and they will not be able to rise for another 100 years, and I'm sending my bombers, and sorry I had to do that. Next 24 hours he says I have accepted the ceasefire. Then, State of Hormuz, just to quote another example, he says, we have nothing to do with it. You come and get it opened. We don't need it. You Europeans, you need to this, that, and the other. And then he says, if it is not Strait of Hormuz, a lot of abusive words, then, this, that, and the other. And then the Strait of Hormuz opens. He thanks the Iranians. And as he thanks the Iranians, in the next 36 hours, he's also again threatening to bomb their grids. And at the same time, he's sending the delegation for the second round as well. What is this strategy?
um, well, first of all, I think obviously Trump has to show that the war has produced results which justified the actions that have been taken. So he has to portray a success, a victory, or at least some form of victory. So he has to. The strategy seems to be issue threats, and then when some understandings are reached, to portray those understandings as being the result of the threats that have been issued, and therefore a victory for American diplomacy. Um, I think the back and forth in positions is probably more relevant to kind of real estate in negotiations, then interstate negotiations. And at the third level, I would say there is also need for some kind of psychoanalysis because, it's a unique personality. He is prone to these kind of mood swings, which emanate in within a matter of hours. So I think we need to learn how to discount many of the things that are said from President Trump to try to understand exactly where the U.S. position is and to negotiate and provide our mediation on that basis. And I think we've done a fairly good job so far of at least discerning what are the core positions of the two sides and trying to negotiate between them. But of course, complications have arisen, first from Lebanon, then from the American blockade that has happened. And those will have to be obviously addressed. I think perhaps some to some extent they have been addressed. We got the ceasefire on Lebanon, even if it's being violated, and hopefully we will get some understanding on the Hormuz issue, at least some understanding on the basis of which the two parties will come back to the table in Islamabad.
This puts the Iranians in a very awkward situation. They have to respond to a leader who blows hot and cold, not just idiomatically, but literally. And then they have to respond to it within the same time frame. Now they have their own internal dynamics, which are not really, stable to the extent of having a uniform perspective. They are, divergent groups and hardliners and softliners and realists and revolutionaries and what you may have. So how do you look at the Iran strategy? Which part of Donald Trump do you think they actually are responding to? And are they responding to the wrong side of Donald Trump? I'll blow you up, Donald Trump, or thank you, Tehran, Donald Trump. And how do you look at? Is there an element of bipolarity in the Iranian responses as well?
Yes, obviously, Talsa, I think you're absolutely right. There are divergent positions, and this is quite natural in any government. There are divergent points of view on critical issues, and this is the case in the Iranian position. Uh, uh, I, the Iranians are very sophisticated negotiators. Having dealt with them, one can say long term. They are long term players as such. But I think the field marshal's visit to Iran was critical because, from what one hears, he was able to meet all the power centers in Iran. And I think his visit and his talks probably enabled a kind of convergent approach by Iran and a response to a realistic assessment of the American position. So I think the Iranians are now fairly coherent, but it's also obvious that their major, if not only, leverage in the whole negotiations is the Strait of Hormuz. And they will, I think, not compromise on that until they are fairly clear on what would happen to their oil trade, to the issue, to the nuclear core issue, and to the sanctions issue. I think the until these understandings are there, probably Iran will continue to play the Hormuz card in some form or the other. Even if it's open, they will say this has to be in coordination with the Iranian military, and therefore sort of keep the sort of hand on the throat, if you will, of the other side until the rest of the issues are, at least the core issues, the nuclear issue and the sanctions issue, if they have satisfaction on that, I think then there will be a lasting agreement on Hormuz. there could be a temporary agreement on Hormuz, but probably not a lasting agreement until the other issues are also resolved.
It's very interesting that you mentioned the Iranian card being Strait of Hormuz, and um, I was going to ask you: is there an expiry date on this card, or is it going to infinite? They can use it anytime, because Donald Trump in his post also mentions that, frankly, we don't we don't depend on the Strait of Hormuz, and then he mentions how many um, ships are going to Texas and other Alaska, for instance, to load up the American oil. And he said that you guys, the Iranians, are losing $500 million a day. So and we are making tons of money on that. So thank you, Revolutionary Guard. But can the Iranians really uh, hold the entire world's one-fifth trade and oil supplies hostage for a long time? Are they not really exhausting their welcome with the world in terms of their case when they continuously use this card?
Yes, well, obviously there are limits to how long and how they will use the Hormuz card. First of all, I think it is a mistake for the US to assert that it is not dependent on the oil from the Gulf. Because if one-fifth of the world's oil is blocked, there will be an impact, or there has been already an impact on oil prices, on gasoline prices, on everything else, food, fertilizer, etc., etc. And it will have a global impact, but it will also have an impact on the US. So it's not entirely true that they have no vulnerability to Hormuz. They have. But how long Iran can afford to alienate the rest of the world, in particular its major customer, which is China? I think the China factor will be important in eventually persuading the Iranians to have a reasonable position on the Hormuz Strait. So they are saying it will be in coordination with Iran, which may mean they will try to take a tax as they have done, or it may mean simply that no warships, no hostile ships, no hostile actions on non-military traffic is fine. Commercial traffic is fine, that they will agree to something like that. I think they'd already agreed to it in the ceasefire. But the American blockade issue has come up, and that will have to be resolved. And there, the U.S. Obviously has leverage, but it is also limited leverage, because you can imagine that blockade, if the Chinese ships try to traverse from Iranian ports, can you imagine whether the U.S. will dare to capture a Chinese ship or a Chinese tanker? I think that would have serious repercussions, and I think the Americans probably understand that. The blockade is being used as a counter to the Iranian strategy on Hormuz, but I think both sides could probably agree to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for commercial traffic in some sort of coordination with Iran. I think Iran will try to retain some level of not control, but influence with regard to the traffic in the Hormuz, and possibly they could find an acceptable basis on which to agree to reopening the strait.
This is fascinating, Munir Saab. Honestly, I mean, such great insights on such total complexity. It looks to me this more like the Russian nestling dolls scenario that you have one doll producing another doll. Towards the very end, and quickly, if you could please, for those of us who are watching the Islamabad round two, what should we expect and which should be enough of by way of success, and what should we not expect or do in terms of analyzing these talks?
I think Obviously, as I mentioned, two things are critical for continuing the momentum of the talks. One is an understanding on Hormuz. I think there will be a focus on that. And the second thing will be an agreement, at least a framework agreement on the nuclear and sanction issue. Probably will not have a detailed agreement on the nuclear and sanctions issues because the time is not sufficient to produce that. But if there is a kind of framework agreement or understanding that enrichment will be, the right of enrichment will be accepted, but enrichment will be suspended for a certain period of time, and that in exchange, the sanctions will be alleviated on Iran. It will be given access to at least some of its frozen resources, and that it may be able to trade normally its oil in a normal way. I think that kind of understanding is possible at the second round. It's not inevitable, but it's possible. But then we'll have a host of other issues that would need to be addressed to achieve a comprehensive peace solution, and that those issues would probably have to be taken up at a later stage, and to keep the momentum of dialogue going, and to keep, and I think Pakistan's role in keeping that momentum, in serving as a basis to bridge positions, will continue to be an important role that we would play.
Munir Akram Saab, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see how the second round in Islamabad between Iran and the US, whose one party is still yet to confirm its participation, i.e., Iran, unfold. All eyes on Islamabad all over again. It looks like a bit of a T20 match. It is not over till the last ball has been bowled. So let's see what last ball is going to bring to us. A super over, a tie, or some team walking out of the ground on some objection or the other. All is happening here in Islamabad.